Welcome, everyone. This is Cecil Scott, and I am here tonight with some very special guests that have joined me for this talk and this segment tonight. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to ask each one of you to share this video as we're getting ready to have a very important conversation. I've seen many posts. I've seen your comments. I've heard your cries. I'm not doing this by myself tonight. This is not about Cecil. This is not about my church, because before I'm a pastor, I'm a man. And I was born into an ethnicity that's in a struggle, that's in a fight right now. So I encourage all of you tonight to stay in tune, stay engaged as we're getting ready to have a conversation, a meaningful conversation about things that need to be addressed. Even those of you who are on tonight, those of you who are sharing this, I want you to comment. If you have questions, if you have solutions, listen, we're not looking at ranting tonight. We've done enough of that. We're not looking at calling each other names or calling each other out of our character, different things. Tonight is about change. Tonight is about solutions, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm grateful tonight to introduce some wonderful people that have taken out of their schedule to join us on tonight. The first person I want to introduce to you, a very special guest that's with us. He is holding one of the highest seats here in Roanoke, Virginia. Can you help us welcome tonight our mayor, Mayor Sherman Lee? Come on, let's show him some love on tonight. And also with us tonight, I'm grateful that we have with us a person who has stood out in our community here lately. Just on this past weekend, he led hundreds of people to protest and to advocate for what's right. Can you help us welcome tonight here in this conversation, Mr. Jordan Bell? Those of you who are on Facebook, again, welcome. And I know you're coming in. Those of you who are just viewing, I want to make sure that you understand this is a conversation about change tonight. We have two more wonderful guests that are with me on tonight, and I am grateful that these particular persons have sought to come tonight to also share in this conversation. It's not by coincidence that you get connected to people, and even on tonight, I want to tell everybody that's listening and that's looking, change can only happen when you have a conversation. We have cross-pollinated tonight, and we have gone down the street, around the corner. This particular ministry is doing wonderful things in our city, and I am grateful tonight from the Elevation Church to welcome Mr. David Shearer. Shearer, did I say that right? Yeah. Yes, all right. I didn't butcher it. And our last guest tonight, he is definitely another advocate in our city, our community. He makes sure that he's a mentor to young gentlemen, and I've seen him do many other things. Can you help me welcome also tonight as another person of change, Mr. Jamar Fuel? Come on, let's welcome him on tonight. All right, so listen, those of you who are with us on tonight, listen, again, those of you who are just tuning in, this topic, this communication is about change. This is not about ranting, it's not about fighting, but it's about having needful conversation to bring about change, not only in Roanoke, Virginia, but bring about change in the world. I want to let you know, one of my sayings, if anybody knows Cecil, you know that we do it better when we do it together. You might be wondering, why did not Cecil Scott open up this to a public forum? You are more than aware by now about the pandemic, COVID-19 that's going on. But through technology, we're still able to communicate. We still will see your comments. We still will see the things that you're saying, and I have a staff here that's going to help us and assist us with that tonight. So again, welcome everybody. Welcome to this conversation. Again, thank you for taking out of your schedule to come and to have this conversation with me tonight about change. In most recent events, I believe by now everyone has seen the fact of the murder of George Floyd. Yes, I said murder, and I have some people here tonight that want to talk more on that. The first person I'm going to ask tonight is actually our mayor, because in most recent surges and events, the death of George Floyd, someone who was just trying to buy items from a store, died under the pressure of a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. The knee of a police officer, Derek Chauvin, who swore to serve and protect. In your opinion, Mayor, do you say that the officer and the other participating officers are guilty of murder, or were they just doing their job? What do you think on that tonight?
I just felt when I first saw it, there was no question that it was murder, and now the autopsy report has confirmed that he died of asphyxiation from the knee on his throat, along with the knees that he had in his back. So I think he is guilty of murder. I think those officers that were there that failed to stop that should be found guilty of at least first degree or second degree murder, but I think they're just.
So I believe first he was charged with third degree, right?
Yes.
So in your experience as a government official, what does that mean? What is third degree versus second and third?
Well, third degree means that there was some premeditating situations that resulted in it. It wasn't premeditated. And it comes up, and murder can rise up to second degree and the first degree. And I think it looks like to me that he was charged with the lesser of the murders in the beginning. And now there's no doubt after watching the film and watching the video that he was charged, that he was murdered. And I'm so pleased that the police chief in that city fired them all immediately, and now I'm hoping that they follow through with charging those others.
So that's the major thing, because we see this constantly. We see that they're arrested, but we don't see conviction. We see that they are taken in. They're just either suspended, and you say this person did fire them, but where's the justice behind it? Because I believe that's what has initiated all of the things that we're seeing right now, because there was no conviction to a degree that justified what was done. Just because they were fired doesn't mean justice was served, right? So in y'all's opinions, maybe somebody else could piggyback on this. Mayor, thank you so much as well. Who else believes in the same sense that he was murdered? Did anybody agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely believe that.
You definitely agree?
Yeah.
So what did you view in that he was murdered?
Anytime you place your knee in somebody's neck, for, we say 8 minutes, 46 seconds, the outcome, isn't going to be good.
Yeah.
When you go through your training and everything, because I went through the academy back in 2000, they teach you different techniques, takedowns, everything, and you try to do that to the best of your ability. But even if you end up with someone in a hold that they probably shouldn't be in, you want to, reposition yourself or get compliance to, to get them out of that position. And, me watching the video, and after watching it a couple times, I couldn't look at it no more, because it looks like he took too much enjoyment out of doing that. Like I said before, I put my hands in my pocket when I want to be cool.
Yeah.
And to put your hands in your pocket while a man has blood running out of his nose and mouth, urine running down his leg, that's just, that's pretty messed up.
Yes, and I agree 300% with you. The fact that people were even saying that, he's down, or he's asking you to get off of him. He can't breathe, but yet and still the officer still remained in a posture that kept pressure on the man's neck until he was no longer existent. What about you two brothers? Anything you want to put in on this particular thing? What do y'all think about this particular case? Is you justify that as murder? Either one of you?
Yeah, 100%. He was murdered. And I think the part that I struggled with the most is what you just touched on, where there were people around that were there, that were saying, drawing attention to the fact that there was a man dying, and they did nothing about it. They chose to continue. He chose to continue to stay there and keep his knee there, and I think that's the part that's harder for me, where it's not, in some ways, like, this is a humanity issue. This was a human being
Yeah.
that died right there, and the fact that, like, they seem to lack the recognition of that happening, that was what made it brutal for me to watch.
Right. So I believe the thing that we may all be saying and we can agree on, the first thing we need to see, if we're talking about solutions tonight, that those that do these types of things need to be held responsible. Can we agree on that? So what do you think on that, Mr. Bell? So in this case, do you think that would bring some type of peace to our current situation? That if this particular officer, all 4 officers were held accountable, what do you think on that take? What do you think that would bring?
I think if they were convicted, it would help bring some kind of peace to everything that's been going on since that death or since that murder. But again, we have to stop isolating these situations. That may bring peace to the demonstrations that are going on right now, but that's not an isolated situation. We have to we have to change the entire system that these police officers felt comfortable enough to even do what they did to George Floyd and not think that they're going to suffer consequences for it.
And I wonder the same thing. What makes an officer feel justified to go through certain extremes, especially when it comes to our ethnicity? Unfortunately, we see it more so with someone of that nature, but just in Charleston, when someone walked in and sat in a church and murdered countless people, was able to be detained and put into a police car. But someone who just had a fake $20 bill was strangled out, to the point where he had no more life left in him. Again, this is not putting anybody in an awkward place tonight. We're speaking facts. We're speaking truth on tonight. And I believe, realistically, at the end of the day, if there's no accountability to the situation, as you said, as I believe all of us have said, there will not be change. One thing you said, Mr. Bell, and I appreciate that as well, it's not just this one situation. We can't just isolate this. So I hope you're all hearing these solutions tonight, police officers, government alike. We can't just isolate this one situation. We have to make sure that not just locally, but globally, that officers and people of power are held responsible to their actions, all right? Does anybody disagree? I believe we all agree. Y'all agree? So even with this, we know people are angry. We know people are upset. We know tonight that there are things that are surging right now as a result of what we're seeing and what we've heard. Again, we want solutions tonight. We just don't want to rant. We just don't want to ramble. But those that are listening and those that will hear this later, will play this later, we want you to hear the cries of people who have to exist in this climate every day. We have different professions here. Even to our mayor tonight, I'll start this question with you, and we'll move it around the room as well. How do you believe we should reconcile in peace to bring justice? How do we reconcile in peace? What is going to be the peaceful way to bring justice, not just in this moment, as Brother Bell said, but justice that continues, justice that sustains?
Well, I think we have to make sure that these individuals that competed and were involved in this crime should be brought to justice and make sure justice is carried out. That's so important. And I think that's what hurts and angers a lot of people across the country. As I mentioned earlier, not only this case, but they see it happen time after time after time.
Right.
And it's just so frustrating. And we've got to make sure that we hold our local officials, our prosecuting attorneys, judicial system, hold them accountable to make sure that justice is served.
Hold them accountable. So accountability. And even realistically, if you look at lives all over the world, right? Someone that invented something was the example that whatever that was works, right? So I don't believe there's a difference with justice, right? So if we want to see justice that works, we have to see it initialized. There has to be a starting point, right? So I believe this is a good starting point, that if it was to start with these 4 officers, that perhaps it would bring hope back to our community, back to our culture. It would bring some type of sense of we're on the right path. We might not just have arrived there fully, but at least there would be some hope. There would be some type of sense of ease, because for us to exist, even in this time, is existing under a pressure, under a weight, on eggshells, wondering, am I going to be the next hashtag? Am I going to be the next victim? Not only us, but how many of you, I believe all of us here, have children, or you have relatives? What are we saying to our young people? We're going to get to you, all of your parents, because one thing that really made my heart cringe, and yes, he yelled mama, but as a parent, that should do something to you when that man was laying there hopeless and he yelled out for his mother. What would you say? Anybody can tag in here. What would you say to the parents tonight? Well, what does that need to sound like? What do we need to say to our children in this moment and in this time?
I can only speak from my context, and as a white man who, like I was telling you guys, I grew up in Vermont, and I didn't have the exposure to the systemic racism that's in our country, because Vermont is the least diverse state in the nation, until I moved to the South. And for my daughter, I was talking to a black single mom in our church community this week, and I was just asking her, like, what is it like for her right now? And she was telling me that right now her son is amazing. He's 6 years old, and he is just like the highlight of every time we go to church. Like, he is energy, and he's a big smile, and he's a great kid. But she was saying, like, everyone views her son as cute, but the thought that 5-10 years from now, people will look at that same boy and see him as a potential threat. She doesn't know how to have a conversation like that with her son, to prepare him for that. For a police officer, to say, yes, sir, no, ma'am, say the right things. And so then for me, I've never had to think about that with my daughter. I've never had to think about, how do I set her up for success when dealing with a police officer, because I don't have to think about that.
Wow.
And so, obviously I don't have any answers. I don't know necessarily the right things to do, but I know one thing I'm trying to do with my daughter is to instill the right values into her, and even from an early age, values that can carry over. So, like, be kind. We're kind to every single person. And so when you're 5, that means one thing, but when you're 15, that's where, no, that situation is wrong, because we're kind to people. We're kind to people no matter what their skin color is, no matter if they're black, brown, or, part of a community that we're not part of. And I think if a parent is trying to figure out, like, how do I have conversations? Well, I think even that thought in your brain should trigger, like, I need to have a conversation. Even if I don't say the right thing, even I just want to instill some values and change, just try to change some of that perspective. Because what the problem has been is, as I'm learning, again, I don't know everything, but is that it's a generational thing. It's just generation after generation after generation. And if we can try to be...
Do you think it's something taught then, or?
Yeah, well, yeah. I think it's something that's, like, built within our culture, that we just, that somehow it gets carried on generationally. And I feel like it's like the sin of our nation since the beginning. And so in order to counteract that, I don't know, but I think it does start with a conversation. Especially, I think bringing up your kids is a great way for that to start a conversation.
Yeah, so I believe, go ahead, Mayor.
I mean, what moved me about that, and I just had heard that. I didn't hear that. I know he said some things, but I heard him say mama. And what that means to me is that parents, you view your parents as your keeper, as your helper, as somebody that when it looks like there's no way out, mom or dad or somebody means something to you, they can help you. And I think personally, he loved his mother, but I think parents gives that security that you have, and you feel that, and when you're in tough situations, and he was in a difficult situation, but he cried out for his mother.
Yeah.
I think that touched me from the standpoint of going through that he felt that, hey, Mom, you've probably helped me many times
Right.
before. I need you now.
Yeah.
Very touching.
I think that's the most lowest cry that any man could articulate from his mouth. Because as a strong man, you don't want to show weakness. You don't want to show any type of vulnerability. But when a man cries for his mama, you know he's in pain.
You know, anybody knows me know I'm a mama's boy. And, you know, I can bump my toe and I'm going to call my mama, you know, and, you know, when I watch that video and I'm seeing, you know, he's hollering for his mama, because you feel like the mama going to make everything better, you know, and at that time it was, you know, I think they said his mom had already passed. His mom, you know, she was passed and gone, you know, so it was nothing that his mom could do but for him to, you know, still holler for his mom. You know, it do something to you. Like, anybody that can watch that video and not be affected by it, you know, they're not a person. But I wanted to go back to the accountability part, you know, for a second. I noticed that with a lot of the officers that kill, you know, the black man, that they have a past. Like, you know, once their record is shown on TV, like their discipline record, it's a long discipline record. And one thing that I don't think can happen, I don't think that you can honestly do an investigation on your own in the department. You know, I always felt like another department should police, you know, the department for like an internal investigation. Because if I get in trouble, if I'm a police officer and I get in trouble, and I got a buddy up in internal affairs, you know, he'd probably, you know, tell me if he can get me out of it, like, I got y'all, take care of it. So then, you know, them things start mounting more and more and more, and then it gets repetitive where you stop somebody, you may do something to them, and you know, like, oh, my buddy gonna take care of it. Like, you know, I think this can be nipped in the bud if, you know, okay, you pull somebody over, you do something to them that you're not supposed to do, get them out of here. That's it, fire them. Take their, you know, police certification. They can never do it again.
Because police officers are still humans, just with a uniform.
Yeah, yep. They just
And
got
we don't know the underlying anger. We don't know the underlying tension. And realistically, another solution here, because if we want the change, those that don't like the methods and things like that, sometimes we got to take the role to be able to bring change within that department, to bring change within that community. We got some more questions getting ready to come in. Thank those of you again who are tuned in. We see your questions and your comments coming in. We're going to ask some of those here openly just in a few moments. But listen, as we're moving along, again, we want solutions tonight, not just to ramble. And we're doing a great job. I believe some of you tonight have heard some of these solutions already across the stage. Listen, there's different backgrounds here. There's different beliefs. There's different things, and we acknowledge all of those. We have, again, our friend from Elevation Church, Mr. Shearer, and I am just grateful for this opportunity to have him in the building. One thing also we want to address tonight as solutions is the most segregated day we see in America typically is Sunday. It doesn't matter what your faith background is. It doesn't matter who you believe in or what you worship or who you worship. The most segregated day still in America is still on Sunday. What would you say, and I know we've had conversation before, I said maybe perhaps having an open door, right? Somebody has to open the door to let the other person through. Because if my door tonight was locked, no one else could come in, right? But even with faith believers, right? Whatever that bridge is, what do you say to that? Do you think it's just opening the door and somebody having a conversation? What was your perspective on that?
Yeah, we were talking about that a little bit earlier today, and even as a church staff, with our lead pastor today, we were having this conversation, and one of the things that we talked about was, like, we take a lot of pride at our church that we have some mix of diversity in our congregation, but we've been convicted or even just realizing that it's so much more. It's not something that we want to treat as window dressing. And I think that's sometimes what happens in a church that has some diversity within it. If we celebrate the diversity without addressing the disparity, that's hypocrisy. That was what our pastor said. And I think for us, we've been trying to learn how to introduce not just having people in the room, but actually listening to what they're saying and having conversations and even getting a new level of understanding and perspective from them. And in the past week, that's been something that we've been really trying to focus on, especially since the murder of George Floyd, is just creating a space where we can have these conversations. Exactly what you're doing tonight, where we can have conversations about what it is, what the experience is like. And I know for me personally, hearing from people that I care about and love, and hearing about the struggle that it is for them to be in this city or in this country, and I'm not having those experiences. I was sharing with you guys how someone else that I was talking to, they got pulled over just for throwing gum out the window.
Yeah, talk to us about that. Tell us
Yeah,
about that.
and they got pulled over and had an altercation with a police officer because they threw gum out the window while they were driving. And how I throw gum out my window all the time, and I've never once thought I might have a police officer pull me over for that, and it might lead to something that is scary. And so that's where if I don't have conversations with people, I'll never know that. And I will live in this bubble where, everything's cool, everything's great. And I don't have a fundamental understanding of the struggle that is happening in our country right now. And so, again, I'm so new at this, but I'm trying to learn how to have some conversations and just kind of expand my perspective so that I can stand up for the things that are right.
And I think that's the most powerful part, is having the conversation. And really, I see it pulling on your heartstrings. I do. I believe, realistically, if the conversation needs to be had, and I'm not throwing it either way, to cast blame, but at some point, when someone does something wrong, someone has to say something in an apologetic way. And I'm not saying that you're responsible. You're representing a culture, but I'm saying at the end of the day, someone needs to stand up and say 2 words.
I'm sorry.
There it is.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry.
And it's not you.
Yeah.
And I'm not pointing at you. And I want the world to know tonight, as I said earlier, that even in this, that we are not pointing fingers. We're not pointing fingers at anyone particular. We're looking at an issue that dealt with people that you don't even know.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure, and I'm not just guessing, I'm just flapping in the wind here, perhaps it's not your family particularly, but at the end of the day, it affected a whole culture of people who are now bleeding internally and crying out for help and for hope. So we're not casting blame at you, but what we're saying is, as a people, somebody has to stand up and stand out and say, guess what? We've got your back. That we can stand united, and not only as outside of the police office, but also inside of it, holding each other accountable to the actions that they do, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if no one says that it was wrong, if my peer beside me can't say that I was wrong, where is the justice that brings change, not only for that moment, but for the people that have to come in those doors and serve and protect, who are sworn in a courthouse by government officials to serve? Does it make it okay for the next officer to put their knee on somebody's neck? Does it make it okay for somebody else to shoot somebody senselessly in a car? Does it make sense for somebody that's selling CDs on a parking lot to lose their life? I don't believe that's justified in any sense of the form. But I believe the way to healing is first recognizing the hurt, recognizing the pain, recognizing what was going on. So at that moment, when the recognition comes into play, then that's where healing truly can begin. We're talking about solutions tonight, everyone. we're talking about solutions tonight. We're talking about solutions, and the solution, as we said, was recognizing, right? You said having the conversation, because where there's no communication, there can never be any change, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that's been said in this room a couple of times was also that word of transparency.
Yes.
And I, as someone said it, I was trying to wrestle with that internally. The Bible talks about search my heart, and I wanted to be the kind of person that like searches my own heart. And I think when you talk about transparency, it's easy to look at other people need to be transparent. Other people need to be more transparent with the words that they say, or a police department needs to be transparent with their investigation. But I'm realizing that part of it also needs to be like, I need to be transparent with my own like heart, and transparent with just to say something, even if I don't have the perfect words or have the perfect thought out thing, like just to start to say something.
Say something.
Is where like I use the privilege that I enjoy in my life as a white person in this culture, that I leverage that somehow and try to say something to stand up to the injustice that's happening in our country.
I heard one of my mentors, my leaders last night, had mentioned that even through civil rights, even through the Underground Railroad, it was not just our culture that helped us through that. It was persons of other persuasions that stood up and assisted those things to happen. We want to welcome tonight, we are so grateful that even in the midst of everything that's going on, he still saw fit to join us tonight. Can we welcome tonight our Captain Samuel Roman to the stage on tonight? Can we thank him tonight. So we've talked about many things, and I'm not sure if I hope you weren't on your phone while you're driving. I'm not going to snitch on you. But listen, as we're talking tonight, we're trying to find solutions. We've seen the rants, we've seen the raves. That brings about no type of change, right? If the people aren't heard, we do agree that it's just flying in the wind. But for those of us who are here tonight, we have some type of influence in the community. We have people who just led hundreds of people this weekend to have their voices heard. We have you here tonight that leads all of our policing systems in Roanoke. We have the mayor. We have someone that's doing a wonderful job with mentoring young children. Also, he does other things that I won't disclose publicly, because if you're doing wrong things, you might just get caught. But we want to hear from you tonight, because at the end of the day, the first question I ask, and I hate to rewind, but I think this is needed now that you're here, is that at the end of the day, I believe all of us agreed mutually, but I think the people need to hear from you as a person of your profession. And not only so, we want to acknowledge tonight that you're not just the chief of police. You're a believer, but you're also a father. You have not only a daughter, but you have a son. And he's looking at you as a mentor, as someone who's going to show him what value his life brings. So what do you say in accordance to what we're hearing in America now with the most recent, the George Floyd case? Just in your opinion, I don't know how much you can say as in your role, but we all felt as if that was murder. Even Mayor said that there's different degrees to it. He was charged with third degree. Some were kind of argumentative about should have been considered second or first degree, and I really don't know the technicalities of those. Maybe you can address that to the people and tell us just your view on it, in your opinion.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, let me say thank you for allowing me to be in a forum like this with such distinguished gentlemen that's up here right now. And I apologize for my tardiness, but it's been some long days in recent days. So my thought process, obviously, on what has happened in Minnesota is simple. It's wrong. It's murder. That's how I feel about it, both from a professional and a personal opinion. When you look at the video, and obviously I've watched it several times, but I've resigned within myself not to watch it again because I feel myself get angry about it. And it is because that I am angry within myself. I understand why others are angry about that as well. So, I think obviously, the charges should have been to the fullest extent and to the maximum, because I think it is important for not just the criminal justice system, but for society to make a statement that this is wrong. And so I think it's very important that that statement is made. And so obviously the laws are very different, and it varies from state to state. And I am not well versed in Minnesota in the law in that state, but what I do know is what I saw is wrong. And had that been in this state, I would have been one of the advocates in the different forums I'm in, whether it be the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police or the International Association. My voice would have been saying full extent charge, not second degree, not third degree, not fourth degree, but first degree murder.
And I believe that's what the people need to hear.
Right.
Because as they're viewing us, and I said this earlier, before I'm a pastor,
Right.
before I'm a husband, I'm a man. But even my ethnicity, I'm a minority that stands out, even right now in times like this, as some supposed type of threat, right? How is it now that as we are viewing different things, as we are viewing not only this case, but other cases that have gone on before, and there's definitely a whole list of those. We have George Floyd, definitely the most recent, Christian Cooper, the Central Bird Watcher, the Ahmaud Arbery that couldn't go jogging. There's a whole list of these. What would you say to America, to Roanoke and the region at large about these cases? I know you said that was murder, but looking at the history, looking at the timeline of these ongoing things, what would you say to Roanoke? What would you say to the world to reassure them about police officers in general?
Well, I would say in each of those instances, obviously there is something amiss. There is something wrong when it seems to be a systematic approach to dealing with how certain people look when you interact with them. And we have got to get to the bottom of the cause of that, which is why I think forums such as this is so very important. Because as you mentioned earlier, there is a lot of influence on this stage in different areas, in arenas. But the fact of the matter is, our success is how do we garner that influence and make it work together? You mentioned, some of these cases, I have a lot of influence on how the officers are trained and how they view things. I have a lot of influence on what the culture of the police department is, which I believe is, one of the issues when you look beyond Roanoke in terms of different police departments. Look at the culture of the police department. The culture dictates, in some cases, how officers respond. So I am in a position to help shape that culture. The mayor's in a position to shape some cultures in his environments. Jordan is in a position to shape some cultures in everyone up here, whether it be the pastor capacity, the chief capacity, or just a black man in Roanoke, all of which I am. I'm E, all of the above. So I have the opportunity to try to look for ways in which I can make a positive impact. And not a solo impact, but I'm looking for opportunities in which I can partner with other people with influence and then get our thinking on the same page, which does not mean I want your thinking to be my thinking, but I want to remain convincible because your ideas may be better than mine. Yeah. But if I stay in a state of being convincible, when you tell me your idea, I can say that's good. And so I think that's where the real power is, not just on this stage, but beyond, when we can get together and we can discuss and we can talk and we don't come to the table with our own exclusive perspectives, but we come with our perspectives, but yet still able to listen and apply other perspectives as well.
And that's the power of this tonight. Again, as you said, we have diversity here tonight, not just in culture, but in professions, in ideas.
Yes.
And it would bring about no change if everybody just thought the same. Yes, we're going to agree on certain things if we just all agreed about the case with George Floyd being definitely murdered. As you eloquently said, Mayor said, that it should have been perhaps the full extent of the law. I agree. I can't bend anybody's mind, but I believe clearly peace would be made. I believe that solutions would come when those things are put into place. I don't know what kind of influence we have as just a little body, but I believe as a gathered body, if we stand together and make that sound, we might not know, as you said, the laws in Minnesota, Minneapolis, but what we have to do is make a bigger sound together to get that message to a place where it didn't happen. Because what tears me up, and we got to move on, is that even now in every city, there's things of protest going on. Some peaceful, yes, but some are hired just to create problems. Some travel from city to city to create problems. Believe it or not, people are hired to go and riot and to make havoc. But the police departments in every city and every state were not the ones who initialized what's going on. But this is the pandemic inside the pandemic, that black men are viewed in one light, white men are viewed in another light, and now we hold all of them to a category that they seemingly can't escape because of what someone else did. It's no different for police officers, it's no different for preachers or pastors, it's no different for activists or whoever it is. But I believe solution, and that's what we're talking about, is that sense of that big word that we seemingly forget. And that's that word called communication, right? I asked you also in that question, so what does that look like for our children, right? Well, what is the message we're going to send to our young African sons? Maybe another father might want to tag on. I don't want to be the only talker. But somebody else, what would your message be to your child tonight as far as their value? How do we speak to that? I know you said as far as speaking from the perspective of your culture to let them just be good to everybody and to do kind things. Definitely, I agree with you 300%. What else could we say to our children? Anyone else?
Well, to make sure we be that example. Not only just say that, but they can see how you relate to people, how you deal with issues when things don't go your way, you're frustrated, you're hurt, but you show them that you care, and also how you forgive. How you so I think you do much by example, and that's what I think our children and others need to see in us as parents and as leaders. And our perspective is, how do we handle adversity? Because that will come in all of our lives, and so I think that's important today. You don't necessarily have to like it, but how do you deal with that? How do you make that go? How do you keep going and things like that?
And I think that stems off to how kids are acting in school. It starts at home. The examples we give as parents to our children kind of stimulates their actions in the community, right? So I guess you're saying be just a positive light, as you even echoed as well, in the home. I think we need to speak not only to our children's values, but just values as people. If y'all are looking tonight, if you're viewing tonight, we want this message to echo that everyone matters, right? That no one is devalued, no matter where you came from, no matter who your parents are, your grandparents, that each one of you out there, because there's nothing more greater than the human race, right? Everyone versus where you came from, who all the ancestors were. I want to make sure you understand the message tonight of communication, that you matter. So as we keep moving tonight, thank you so much for those wonderful comments, Chief. And I want to ask those of you who are here tonight as we keep moving. I know that we're growing through the hour here, but as we're looking for solutions to what's going on tonight, and we talked about communication, we talked about accountability. I want to ask you, Mr. Bell, how has it been even for you? How have you been treated by officers in Roanoke that makes us feel threatened as young black men?
Well, just being a black male in Roanoke, you have this sense of, people in general have this sense of, I guess they call it fear, or they just want to find out, what are you doing? Why are you in this neighborhood? Why are you driving this car? Why does your car look like this? I've had bad interactions with police officers, just driving my car sometimes. So I think the same thing that's going on around the country, around the state, when it comes to how black males are viewed, is also going on here, right in Roanoke.
So this happened to you before. What did you do in that interaction? What was the protocol during that?
Well, luckily, I study, I read, so I knew how to interact with the officer after he pulled me over, or after he's asking me questions and things like that. So I knew how to interact with him. I knew certain things that he probably didn't think I knew, so he wasn't able to maybe, search my car or search me, my person. So I kept calm in that moment. I always tell my friends, I always tell younger people, if you're pulled over by the police, whatever you do, make it to court. Whatever you do in that moment, stay calm enough that you're able to fight it in court. Whatever you do.
Stop, rewind, and play that one more time, because this is a solution, all right? Because versus ranting and raving and getting irate, right? Get the solution one more time so they make sure they got it tonight. What was the solution?
If you're a young black male and you feel that you have been harassed or pulled over unlawfully, keep your calm, keep your composure, and fight it in court.
Make it to, I like
Make
that.
it to court.
I love it. No, I agree with you 300%, because at the end of the day, that's the issue. I don't know if Chief, would you agree with that? Is not complying with what's asked is what leads to some of this, or?
Well, I think there is a lot of things that lead to that, but I guess I would want to say to Jordan, I apologize, because any black male that lives in this city under my leadership as police chief, I do not want you to have that perspective. So I apologize that you have had that experience, and I make a commitment to you that as long as I'm chief, I will do everything I possibly can to work with you and work with everyone up here to ensure that the culture of the police department does not precipitate that feeling that you had when you got stopped. That's my commitment to you. So
Solutions.
I would say that, I've had these conversations with my son. I know exactly what Jordan is talking about. My son has had similar experiences outside of the city of Roanoke. When me, assistant chief of police, I'm in different places, I have those same wonders, and I have those same thoughts coming through my mind when I look in my rearview mirror. And it is simply because of some of the things that we have seen occur to people who look like you and I. So my job, whatever influence I have and whatever partnerships I can create, that's, I believe, where the power is. So you can bring your experience. I would love to bring you to the police academy doing training and have you share that experience with officers so they see from a foundational posture of what is existing, some of the concepts or the perceptions that exist, and hopefully we can teach them that they have to work a little bit harder to break down those perceptions. I think in some cases Roanoke City has really tried to do a good job in doing that with mentorship programs with big brothers and big sisters, and trying to identify young, black male and black female, perhaps at-risk people, so they can partner with. We do that through Bigs in Blue program at the Oliver Hill House, and finding opportunities in which, they do go to the West End Center and help with homework literally every day. But I'm of the opinion that we can never do enough. I'm always looking for more opportunities until no one in Roanoke City feels like you feel. I won't be happy. And I think that we can work together to make that happen.
These are solutions to those that are viewing tonight. These are conversations that need to be had. This is what you need to hear as a people. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. Let me just say, and the chief is now was a part of that, and I hope he'll get back. But several years ago, when we had the problems in Baltimore and in Ferguson, I saw that there was a lack of trust when everybody came to the table, the police officers and the African American community came to the table, but nobody knew each other. They couldn't relate to what they were saying. It's them versus us. That's why 5 years ago, and I think what we need to do, I decided to develop a basketball league. And basketball was just a vehicle. That wasn't what we were trying to do, to bring kids together. We did it in Melrose Park, ages 11 through 18, with the police department. Police officers were coaches, were referees, were cooks, and what we wanted to do was to establish a relationship with our officers and our young people, because the only time they saw a police officer is when they were coming to arrest somebody, moving a body. They had a negative approach, a negative view. But through this league, which we recited, and the chief came over, and I wanted them to see him in his uniform, to talk to the kids. We filled up the park where not only kids, but their parents came and sat there. And some of those young men called the officers by name. Every day they looked forward to that coming. And what we would do, we'd play basketball, we'd feed all of the kids, but we had a period that we call a silent moment, a moment that we would come and I would ask for not only police officers, but people like Richard Chubb, people, principals, students, businessmen to come and talk to them, not about basketball, but talk to them about life, character, and also saying, these are your friends. And what happened is every day, we'd have almost 15 officers out there a day to meet with them. It developed a relationship. And that's where one of the things, I think, as the chief mentioned, that mentorship program that we supported from the city with our police officers to introduce our young youth to police officers in a different light, a light where they come together. And we've gotten support from across the city, from businesses and people you wouldn't think of that contributed to that, because they wanted those young people to get to know that this officer, those officers. And so that's what we do in terms of programs, getting people and young people to know, to deal with the attitudes, to deal with what they've been seeing all their life, to deal with situations that some of them who have had family members who had major run-ins with police, and they built up stigmas. But we had to take that away and try to work with that so that they understand when they see a police officer, it's not, oh, what's going to happen to me now? They understand and feel good about the relationship. And we've done that in our city. And we've been awarded for statewide in terms of reaching out and involving our young people and police officers, because it's called police officer basketball, with a police officer being your coach.
Awesome. And I believe that those interactions and those relationships are definitely healthy and needed. One of the things, anybody knows me, one thing I say as well is consistency equals success. So I know we do things in the heat of a moment, but what happens when the smoke clears, right? Mm-hmm. Are they still visible, right? Are we still gathered together? Are we still having these needed conversations? Are we still meeting in the middle somewhere? Jamar, I know you mentor different young men and you try to help them before they get too close to the edge. Can you tell us maybe some instances before we move on, just as far as young people, since we're on that topic now?
You know, I talk to a lot of young men, and one of the things I always tell them is, you know, your first impression is your best impression. You know, when you meet someone, they're going to remember you from the first time you met. That impression that you give them it means a lot. And I go through Lansdowne, I go through Lincoln Terrace, and I have a lot of guys, they young and old, that reach out to me and call me, and they tell me about different, interactions that they have with the police department. And I'll ask them to run it through to me, tell me what happened. And a lot of it is communication. But a lot of the people that I do talk to, they was raised to hate the police.
Wow.
So I try to give them a different perception because, me, being a deputy before and fugitive recovery private investigator, I deal with the police on every single day. And of course at Walmart, so I deal with the police every single day. So I tell them, like, when something going on, you're not going to call Ghostbusters. You're going to call the police. But I don't let the actions of, you can't let the actions of one rogue officer define the rest either. Because we have a lot of good officers here in Roanoke. A few weeks ago, it was my little brother's birthday. And I sent the message to Perez, Officer Perez. I said, hey, my little brother, he's Down syndrome, want to know if you can ride by, say happy birthday to him. I want to say about 20, 25 cars came, and that made his day. I mean, it probably made my mom's day more, but that made his day, But then we see nothing like that ever make the news. But as soon as, this officer kills George Floyd, and I thank God for technology because it was a lot of George Floyds before George Floyd's that was never even caught on camera. And, I thank, God for technology because now it's bringing things to the limelight. It's bringing more attention on it. But I think, too, that a lot of the protesters that's out here, like the only interaction that they've ever had, the ones that's, acting a fool, is a bad interaction, because they made the wrong first impression.
Yeah.
So when the police see them, they automatically go into defense mode because they know, like, that this person may be a problem. And, as the mayor, as the chief, I think that, y'all or we're going to have to start going into the communities to where they never see, police come and do anything good but take people away. Where we don't know what's going on in the households. It's people hungry. The amount of people that come to steal groceries on a daily basis and they say, I'm hungry. So if we can get out here and do some things, man, that'll help, because I told my mom today, I said, you the right man for the job. I don't think we ever had a chief that can pray for his city, that can get out here, kneel down and just pray for his city. I think prayer will just calm everything down, and I'm glad that you're the chief. I've been saying it for like 5-6 years. I'm like, man, Roman need to be the chief. And 100%, you're the man for the job, and, I'm along for the ride. I want to help in any way I can. And, I want to say this to Jordan. He's a very good guy. And the way that they act after his protest, he didn't deserve the blame for any of this. And I know that he took a lot of heat for everything that was happening. But, what he was trying to do was, bring awareness to the cause. And he took a lot of heat for what everybody else done. So I just want to keep applauding him because, it took a lot of courage to take that heat because he taking a licking right now.
Absolutely. And I would like to say in a public forum, I applaud the actions. I applaud Jordan's actions in trying to gather the people. But, all it takes is a few to cast a bad light on a very good event. Trust me, I know about that, especially in law enforcement. It takes a few bad apples to cast a light on a lot of good officers. And so I applaud Jordan for his efforts and for his activism and social justice. But definitely. But I want to say, I lead a staff of over 300 employees at the police department. And so when we're having these conversations, and I think it's important to have these conversations with the officers, their question for me is, well, Chief, you know as well as anybody that, you've been here before you retired and decided to come back, that we have really put the work in with our community to try to be good community partners. But in this moment of protest, it seems as though everyone has forgotten all of the good hard work that we have gone to put. And I tried to calm the officers by saying, people are not mad with Roanoke Police Department, they're mad with the institution of policing. And so we cannot look at the anger that many of us feel about Floyd's death. We cannot look at the anger as being directed literally toward us. It's being directed toward the institution of police. And yes, we have done a lot of work in the community to make sure that those lines of communication is open. And so I just have to keep them encouraged, because what I do not want to see is the fact that they feel as though the work, community work that they have done doesn't matter. And then that would encourage them to stop because they don't think it's important. And I definitely want the community work that we do at the police department to stay within the culture of the police department. I don't want community policing to be a strategy, or I don't want community policing to be an assignment that I give an officer. I want it to be embedded in the very foundation of what they do as a culture, as part of their personality. So I'm very cautious and very careful to try to make sure that the officers understand on a daily basis, with what we have going on in the country, that your work that you've done in the community, it matters. That will show up eventually, but it does matter, and I want you to continue to that work. So I guess I also have to take a pause for, to make sure that the officers understand that in those instances where 25 police cars show up, it was because they truly cared. And I have to take a moment to really applaud the officers for that, because they are always willing. They find enjoyment in doing that. No one told them. I didn't tell them to go do that. They did that because they wanted to. And in this moment of unrest, I think one of my biggest jobs is to never let them forget that what they're seeing that may be directed toward them is not necessarily specific for Roanoke, but it's because of what's going on in our country. And with that, we still need to get better with what we're doing. I'm not saying that we're great. I'm saying there's still opportunities for us to be better.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Chief. Thank you so much, Jamar. And listen, all of those that are viewing tonight, again, thank you so much for tuning in this far and staying with us. If you haven't done so already, please share so we can spread a positive message throughout the length and breadth of our community and the world at large. As we're coming to a close here very soon, we do have some questions that want to be asked. I have some that have come to me from some of our viewers tonight. And even before we do that, Pastor, we want to let you know again to our viewing audience tonight, we're not here to cast blame. From my heart to yours, I want to tell you publicly, I love you. I know I just met you today. I have nothing against you. You have done nothing to me as a person. So when we look at you tonight, we're not casting blame at you. We're not throwing you under a bus. I want to tell you that we're grateful that you're standing with us. Thank you for everything that you've brought to the table tonight, because where it looked and even you articulated that it felt like a privilege in certain instances. Certain things you said you couldn't relate with. We get it. But thank you for being bold enough. Thank you for having the compassion enough to speak up and to show up. We appreciate you in that regard.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think one of the things that God is trying to teach me, again, I'm coming from that pastoral point of view, but I think one of the things that God's trying to teach me right now is to take that posture of listening and learning, because, my heart breaks when I see something like the murder of George Floyd, and like you articulated so well, like it happening over and over again. And I think I grow more and more frustrated because I don't know how to do anything about it. I don't know what to do about it. And I think in my position, we talked about influence on this stage. One of the things that God has given me is influence over like the person's heart, or like the ability to speak to someone's heart. And I think that's part of what the solution comes in as well. Or when we're trying to talk about solutions, it's not just you know, systems always. It's also like we're dealing with the human heart, and how do we have conversations, and how do we help change a human heart? And I think it does. It starts with us being willing to sit down in a room like this and have conversations with people. And again, not always know the perfect thing to say. I feel like I probably said 20 things wrong tonight, but I'm trying to learn to just embrace that and say, like, I'm going to say something and learn from it. So even when I mess up, I can apologize, say I'm sorry, and but be brave enough to stand up for something that actually like matters. And so this is one of the things in this world right now that actually matters.
Yes, thank you. Again, to all those that
May I say
are
something?
viewing, all of
May
you,
I say
man.
something?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
I think part of the solution is as we are sitting up here being humble within ourselves. So I'll be one to admit, as a community member and community activist, that I did also support Chief Roman becoming chief for the last 3, 4, 5 years. So when that decision was made, I was excited, ready to work with Chief Roman in that process. Even after everything that has happened over this past weekend, I still support Chief Roman being the chief of police. I do think he's the best man for the job. And I also echo what you said about your police officers making an effort to be community engaged. Over the past couple of years, I have seen the process of that. And with Chief Roman being there now, I'm quite excited and sure that that process will become better. So I think I'm humble enough in myself to also sit on this stage and say, Chief, I support you. Whatever I can do to help, we've already discussed it. Me and you and others will have discussions on next steps, but I'm humble enough in myself on this stage to also say, Chief, I support you as well.
I appreciate it.
Communication, right? Because we can assume one thing, but to actually hear it and then to feel it and embrace it, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Jordan. Listen, so there are some questions tonight, and I want to make sure that your questions are heard. We won't prolong very much longer, maybe just for a few more moments. But there are a few things I want to ask, and anyone can openly say the answers to these questions as we're moving forward. But I want to make sure that those that are viewing tonight, again, that you matter, that your questions that you have asked on the feed will be answered. I want to make sure tonight that you understand tonight that your voice is just as important as anyone that's here with me tonight. This is not the only session. Those questions that don't get answered directly tonight, I'm going to make it my business to try to answer those to the best of my ability. If you're commenting or if you've inboxed tonight, if I can't answer it, I'll direct it to one of these wonderful people on stage that possibly will have the answer to solutions. Because again, we don't want to keep ranting. We don't want to keep fighting. We don't want to keep in a controversial state. One question I want to get tonight is from a young lady that's going to join us even at this moment. She wants to ask openly tonight.
We talked about how we feel in solutions. And a solution for me as a black female every time I'm pulled over at 26 is to call my father. When I watched that video, it helped me realize how pointless it is in America to call my father when the police is pulling me over. Because there's nothing that he can do for me in that moment in time. He won't get the respect that I respect him. He's not the king that I see him as to society. And that kind of hurt. So I'm just here to support our community however it is that we do this. I protest peacefully, and I know that everybody does not, but we're fighting for a cause.
Wonderful. So she said, and just make sure we're hearing this correctly, she felt the need to call her father at those moments that, she felt kind of threatened by the police. And at natural calls, she felt in later times that it was no calls because of the outcome or because of the demands that were given her. And that echoes another question I have here even tonight, and maybe our chief can help us to address both of these things. It was asked, how do you change the ingrained culture of profiling blacks in general, more specific black males, when pulled over or in policing scenes? How do we change that?
That is a very difficult question, and if I had the A, B, and C answer, we wouldn't have this problem. So it's a very difficult question, and I certainly appreciate the young lady's comments. And just as I mentioned earlier, it is my goal that people of color, people that look like me, don't have that experience when they are stopped by the police. By nature of police work, I think our look is somewhat, I wear a belt with a lot of things around the waist. Just by visual, I look intimidating, and I have to really work to break down what my appearance may be saying. And in terms of the second part of the question that you read, I think the answer is involvement. That is the very reason why I'm on this stage in uniform, because I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, where the crack epidemic had just completely taken over. New Jack City, y'all seen that movie? That's my hood. That's literally what it looked like where I grew up. And I understand, I've been through the experience of the mayor of New York implementing what he called a zero tolerance policy and the stop and frisk policy. I'm a victim of that, where as a young black male, 16 years old, all I'm trying to do is go to the park and play ball, but I'm stopped by the police 3 and 4 times to have me take my shoes off and check my underwear to ensure that I'm not carrying drugs. And I became Jordan, a social activist wanting to do something, but I took the route of, I want to join that to make a difference in that. And that's the reason why I got in law enforcement. It was never my desire to become chief or be a part of law enforcement so I can be chief and dress up in a shiny badge. No, my goal was to get into it and make a difference. And the part of making a difference was not only getting into it, but getting into leadership where I can have influence and then change culture. And so that's what I would say. A part of the answer is involvement. And that happens. How do we change culture was the question. Involvement. And that's shown in many different ways. For me, it was joining to make a difference from the inside. For Jordan, it may be collaborating and protesting, and bringing attention to the social issues that exist both here in Roanoke and beyond. For the pastors, that may be different. For the mayor, that may be there. But the good news is all of us are doing something. We are all a part of the solution. And if we can collaborate our ideas and make them all of our ideas go in the same direction, that's where we find success, And like you said, Pastor, that is the key to that is communication, is talking, is sitting down. And I think that's how we change cultures. That's how eventually the young lady doesn't feel like that when she's stopped by the police, and Jordan doesn't feel like that when he's stopped from the police, So involvement for you, in that instance, I would invite you to come, to the police department and be a part of their training, so they can see you and you can see them, and we can begin the process of breaking down those silos.
I heard it directly from the chief. He has an open door. He said, come and see, come and be involved. Because until those bridges are crossed, you feel like they are after you, right? So you've heard it directly from the chief of police tonight of Roanoke, those of you who are in this local city, that there is a person on the inside that believes for what's right, all right? Mayor, I know possibly, most definitely, you probably got to get to the office in the morning, so I don't want to hold you too hostage tonight. I heard the chief of police say it tonight. Maybe you could echo on this, because as a person as Mr. Bell is advocating and has marches, perhaps mayor, perhaps police chief, what do y'all think it would be if we bind in together in one march to see officers and city officials to march together? Y'all think that's possible? What's your views on that?
Oh, I think it's possible, and I remember a few years ago we did that as it was relating to violence in the community. So I think it's apt for time to do that, and I've always known the police department to be willing to go into the community, walk the community, walk the streets, and so I think it would be a good show of unity, if nothing else, it would show unity. And so, and I'm suspecting, because I've gotten a number of requests and ideas over the last 3 or 4 days, and that's something that's, I think, is a possibility, and we'll be doing that, and everybody is welcome to come to be a part of that.
I think that's important. Those that are viewing, I've seen your many comments and your concerns in that, because it's one thing for anyone to be looking from the outside in, but they want to know from those who are on the inside, are they supportive? I hope you've heard tonight from the chief. I hope you heard from the mayor tonight, and those that are gathered here tonight, that you feel as if they are not against you, that they feel the same values as we're trying to communicate tonight, that everyone matters, right? To those that have been in fear, we've heard from the chief tonight that his plan is to ensure that the officers, 300 plus staff that he talked about, have proper protocol. They know the things to do. We heard from Mr. Bell tonight that had an instance where he communicated to us that if we follow protocol, that if we make it to court, that's the positive side of change. Not to be one that feels as if you are undefeatable, or that you have all the answers, but to comply with simply what's being asked of you. Because if you keep fighting, things are inevitable to happen, right? So as we're looking at solutions tonight, we talked about being accountable, right? We talked about how not only here in Roanoke, but the world abroad, those that you see doing wrong, hold them accountable to do what's right. Not only holding them accountable, we also talked about in the sense of communication, that we need to also not only communicate our differences to bring about change, to open up those doors with different ethnicities, to open up those doors with persons that might not look, smell like us. We looked at the fact that there's some young men out here feeling as if, because they're hungry, right, that they have to go and loot and steal from an institution, knowing they're not going to make it 2 steps because somebody's coming, walking around the corner. I encourage even those, as even us faith leaders and those who are community leaders, what can we do to feed those persons? I know as a ministry here, we're doing our part. We're doing what we can, and maybe we can do more. But if we don't know that you're hungry, we can't feed you, right? So let's communicate. Let's collaborate, because if we're talking about solutions tonight, we don't want anybody out there just doing what they think is best just to try to make it. As a pastor that had, even in this moment, I want you to know that we care about you, right? That there's more in you than what you see in yourself right now. And you don't have to resort to things of low estate to try to make it in this world, but you have people across this stage, and you have people that's connected to them that will be there for you, not in just this moment of pandemic, but we're talking about sustainability, about continued works, not just holding these officers accountable, not just holding these incidents accountable, not just justice for a moment, but justice and peace and liberty for all for a lifetime. So I want to thank you again, gentlemen, tonight for your participation. Any closing remarks from anyone? Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say something. I know we are here for, we talked about the death of, George, Floyd, but, it's also, we got to stop killing each other also,
Yeah.
The same way we come together for, to discuss the death of George Floyd, we got to discuss one day why we keep killing each other.
Yes.
Because we're taking us away from this earth quicker than the police are, and then I want to reiterate that, we got to wonder, I think, and I know that's my opinion, but I think we got a good police department here, and I don't want people to lose faith into the police department, because they're the ones that govern this town. So, let's keep on looking for solutions, as far as what we can do to kind of quiet down, everything that's going on, so the city can get back to functioning the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
But
And I agree with you 200%. I want to let everybody know, along with those that are here tonight, this is the beginning of these conversations. If there's other topic matters as you even discuss, we just still need to talk about those things. We need to bring those things to the table. This is just not about, like you said, George Floyd. This is about injustices everywhere and things that need to be fixed and addressed and communicated. So let's have that conversation. We'll definitely schedule it. And even anyone else that has any other topics of interest, I believe it needs to be brought out. I believe it needs to be talked about. That's the only way that healing can begin. Again, the acknowledgement of it, forgiveness of it. Okay, then let's work to change. Okay, so even in this conversation tonight, I hope in my prayers tonight that you've taken nuggets that will bring change even to your concept and to your mind. You've heard it again directly from the chief. You've heard it directly from your mayor. You've heard it from others that stand in locked arms to bring change and to stand up for what's right. Violence is not the way. Looting is not the way. Rioting is not the way. If you want peace, and if you sow that peace, if you give that peace, that's the peace you're going to get back, right? I don't. Am I wrong? I just want to make sure I'm not by myself. I want to make sure that you understand tonight. If we're talking about solutions tonight, we have to be the change that we want to see. It has to start within us. We have to do it first. All right. So I'm going to ask something that happened here really quickly, and I know we talked about it earlier, but our chief of police is not only the chief, he's a believer, he's a father, and I'm going to ask him to do this tonight for me. If I can get some help here, I'm going to ask him to close us out in prayer for our city. Is that okay? All right, let's do that.
Father, we thank you for this moment in which you have allowed us to come together. We thank you, oh God, for its productiveness, and we thank you for the positivity that has come from this and will go forth and prosper from here. We ask, oh God, that you would cover our city, oh God. We ask that you would bring calm to our city, bring unity to our city, oh God. We thank you in advance for all that you are doing, and we understand that some way, somehow, some shape, some form, that you will get the glory out of all of this. We thank you in advance for all the things that you are doing, oh God. Bless each and every one of those who will watch this later on video. Bless them. Help them to understand, oh God. And most of all, let them know that there are people here who want better, and the solution lies within us. We thank you in advance for all of these wonderful things that you are going to do. And it is in your name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So much, Chief. Those of you who are on there tonight, I want you to use this hashtag, and I want you to remember tonight that you matter. Hashtag I matter. Put that out there. Make sure you encourage somebody. Post positive thoughts. Post positive affirmations for the next few days, for the rest of your life. God bless all of you, and we'll see you at the next appointed time.